Clarity, it sounds simple, doesn't it? Almost too simple to be powerful. But clarity, true, focused, unshakable clarity, is the foundation of every extraordinary result. It's the starting point of all progress, all discipline, all meaningful success. And yet, it's also one of the rarest things in most people's daily lives. Most people wake up and dive straight into the noise. They check their phone before they even leave bed. They're bombarded by notifications, emails, updates, alarms, alerts, distractions. Their brain is already reacting to the world before they've even taken a moment to ask themselves a single question: what actually matters today? Without clarity, you're not making choices, you're making excuses. You're not acting with intention. You're just responding to whatever screams the loudest. And the danger of that kind of day, the kind where you're busy, where you're in motion, where you're constantly doing, is that it feels productive. It feels like you're grinding, like you're hustling, like you're moving forward. But in reality, you're just spinning your wheels in place. You're chasing distractions dressed as obligations. You're solving problems that don't belong to you. You're reacting to someone else's priorities. And then you wonder why you're exhausted, overwhelmed, and still stuck. Clarity is the antidote to this chaos. It cuts through the noise. It forces you to pause and confront the uncomfortable truth that a lot of what fills your day is simply not important. And here's the real power. When you know what matters, you can stop wasting time on what doesn't. Think of clarity as your internal GPS. Without it, you're just driving. You might be moving fast. You might be working hard, but you have no idea where you're headed. Or worse, you're headed in the wrong direction. Clarity is what gives your work meaning, your time structure, and your energy purpose. Now here's where most people get stuck. They confuse movement with momentum. They confuse multitasking with mastery. They confuse being efficient with being effective. You can be highly efficient at doing the wrong things. You can have a to-do list that's a mile long and still be nowhere near your goals. That's what happens when you don't start with clarity. When you operate from a place of clarity, your days change. You no longer ask, "What do I need to get done today?" Instead, you ask, "What is the most important thing I can do today that aligns with my ultimate vision?" That's a completely different mindset. One is about checking boxes. The other is about creating outcomes. One leaves you busy. The other makes you unstoppable. Here's the truth that a lot of people don't want to hear. If you don't know what your top priority is, your day is already lost. If everything matters, then nothing matters. If you're trying to chase 5 rabbits, you're not going to catch any of them. You need to pick the one that matters most and go all in. Clarity simplifies everything. It gives you permission to ignore the trivial, to delegate the non-essential, and to eliminate the distractions that masquerade as duty. It doesn't mean you'll never be busy again, but it does mean your busyness will be aimed in a specific direction, with a goal, with a purpose, with a plan. That's the difference between productive and just active. People say they don't have time. That's a lie. Everyone has the same 24 hours. The difference is the people who achieve more, who create impact, who rise above. They've decided what matters most before the day begins. They've made the hard choice to be intentional, not reactive. They don't waste hours on things that won't matter in a week. They don't spend energy impressing people who won't even remember their names. They're not afraid to say no, because they've already said yes to their mission, their focus, their clarity. When you lack clarity, you become a slave to urgency. But when you live with clarity, you become a master of priority. So the question isn't, are you working hard enough? The question is, are you clear enough to know what you should be working on in the first place? Clarity doesn't come from hustle. It doesn't come from grinding through your to-do list. It comes from stillness, from reflection, from stepping back and asking the right questions. What am I really trying to build? What am I really trying to solve? What outcome would actually move the needle for me, for my team, for my life? Without answers to these questions, your productivity is just motion. It's aimless, directionless, powerless. But with answers, real, honest answers, everything changes. Suddenly, you know what to say yes to. More importantly, you know what to say no to. You stop getting pulled into every fire, every ping, every meaningless meeting. You rise above the noise and start acting with precision. Clarity isn't a luxury. It's not something you get to think about if you have time. Clarity is the first discipline of high performance. It is the difference between a life of reaction and a life of purpose. It is the single most important force that determines where your energy goes, where your time flows, and what kind of life you actually create. We live in a culture obsessed with being busy. Somewhere along the way, society sold us a dangerous illusion. The idea that the busier you are, the more valuable you must be. That constant movement, packed calendars, and endless task lists are symbols of success. But let's break that illusion right now. Activity is not the same as achievement. Just because your calendar is full doesn't mean your life is full of progress. Just because you're exhausted at the end of the day doesn't mean you've accomplished anything that truly mattered. You can spend hours bouncing from task to task, replying to every email, joining every call, staying on top of every message, and still be stuck in the same place you were last week, last month, or even last year. Motion doesn't equal momentum. Being active doesn't guarantee advancement. What's worse, we often reward the appearance of effort more than the results it's supposed to create. Think about it. In most environments, workplaces, schools, even families, people get recognized for how much they do, not for how much of the right thing they do. They show up early, stay late, juggle multiple projects, reply within minutes, and somehow that becomes the definition of high performance. But in reality, it's often just frantic activity without focused impact. There's a reason you feel busy but unsatisfied. There's a reason you cross off 10 things on your list but still feel behind. It's because most of that energy is going into low leverage activities, things that look productive but don't actually produce results. It's like being on a treadmill. You're sweating, you're working, your heart rate is up, but you're not going anywhere. And when that becomes your default state, you burn out before you break through. The real high performers, the ones who consistently deliver results, they don't confuse action with accomplishment. They know the difference. They understand that results don't come from doing more. They come from doing what matters most. They don't brag about how long they worked. They're obsessed with what they created during that time. It's not about quantity, it's about quality. It's not about motion, it's about direction. There's a hidden cost to constant activity. It destroys your ability to focus. When you fill your day with minor tasks and shallow work, you leave no room for the deep thinking, creative energy, and strategic decisions that actually move the needle. You dilute your impact by spreading yourself too thin across 100 things that barely matter, instead of pouring your full power into the few things that actually do. You're not building anything significant by doing everything superficially. You have to ask yourself, what is the outcome I'm actually trying to create? Because if you're not working toward a clear result, you're just staying busy for the sake of it. That's not leadership. That's not progress. That's just avoidance. Sometimes the truth is, we stay busy because it protects us from facing the things that really matter. The difficult conversation we've been avoiding, the decision we keep postponing, the bold move that would force us to step out of our comfort zone. Busyness becomes a shield, something we hide behind so we don't have to confront what really counts. But achievement doesn't hide. Achievement demands attention. It demands intentionality. You don't stumble your way into achievement. You choose it, you plan for it, you protect your time for it. It's deliberate, it's focused, it's aligned with your goals and your values. That means saying no to things that are merely urgent, so you can say yes to things that are truly important. The hard truth is this: if everything feels important, then nothing is. You can't prioritize everything. You can't chase every task. You can't treat all work as equal, because it isn't. Some things you're doing are distractions dressed as responsibilities. Some things you're chasing are just vanity metrics. They look good on paper, but make no difference in your real-world outcomes. You have to be willing to call that out in your own life. You have to develop the discipline to focus on what delivers results, even if that means doing less overall. Think about the most impactful people in any field. They aren't the ones who did everything. They're the ones who did the right things consistently. They focused, they refined, they executed on what mattered. That's what creates impact. That's what builds legacy. That's what separates movement from mastery. Being busy is easy. Anyone can fill a day. Anyone can answer emails. Anyone can attend meetings, but not everyone can lead. Not everyone can execute. Not everyone can deliver results that count. That requires clarity, discipline, and courage, the courage to stop chasing activity and start chasing achievement. That's where your power really is. There's a fundamental truth that many people never fully embrace. Acceleration does not come from addition. It comes from subtraction. You don't speed up your life, your business, your results by piling on more. You speed up by letting go. You accelerate by cutting away the clutter, the noise, the unnecessary. You create focus by elimination. Most people think success is about doing more. More tasks, more meetings, more commitments, more goals, more strategies, and they wonder why they're burned out, stretched thin, constantly overwhelmed. They confuse complexity with sophistication, when in fact, complexity is often just disguised confusion. The people who truly accelerate are the ones who have the discipline to simplify. They understand that doing more things means doing each one with less intensity, less presence, and less excellence. And that's not a recipe for growth. That's a recipe for mediocrity. If you want to go fast, you have to travel light. You can't sprint while dragging a 100-pound backpack of obligations that don't serve your mission. Every task you say yes to is a trade-off. Every meeting you accept is time you're not spending on what actually moves the needle. Every distraction you entertain is a thief stealing your energy and attention. You don't just need a to-do list, you need a stop-doing list. Elimination is not just about removing distractions, it's about making space for greatness. It's about clearing room for deep work, powerful ideas, intentional decisions. You can't create anything meaningful in the margins of your schedule. You can't lead when your day is dictated by whatever pops up next. You have to make room for what matters most. That means looking at your life, your work, your calendar, and asking, what can I let go of that is no longer aligned with where I'm going? It might be habits, it might be projects, it might even be people, and that's not always easy. In fact, elimination is often uncomfortable because it forces you to confront the truth about what's essential and what's not. It demands clarity, it demands honesty, it requires you to say no, not just to the things you dislike, but to some things you're actually good at, some things that are familiar, some things that used to serve you but no longer do. We often hold on to too much. We tell ourselves, maybe I'll need this later. Maybe this will work out eventually. Maybe I can manage it all. But maybe isn't a strategy. And maybe is what keeps people stuck. You can't evolve while clinging to what no longer fits the next version of you. Just like pruning makes a tree stronger by removing the excess, elimination makes you sharper by removing the unnecessary. Not everything deserves a seat at your table. Not every opportunity is the right one. Not every path leads to your destination. The high achievers, the game changers, the real difference makers, they aren't afraid to cut. They understand that focus is not created by doing more, but by doing less with more intention. They're not scared to say no. They're not worried about disappointing others. They're more committed to their vision than they are to being liked. They protect their time like it's their most valuable resource, because it is. And that's another truth most people ignore. Time is not just limited, it's non-renewable. You can get more money. You can get more experience. You can even get more knowledge, but you can't get more time. Every yes costs you something, so the question isn't whether you're willing to be busy. The question is whether you're willing to be intentional. Whether you're willing to cut the noise so you can hear your own voice. Whether you're willing to eliminate good things so you can make space for great ones. The uncomfortable part about elimination is that it requires you to prioritize. And prioritizing is hard because it forces you to define success. It forces you to draw a line and say, this is what matters, this is what I'm building, this is the outcome I want. That kind of clarity eliminates excuses. It removes hiding places. It demands courage, because once you know what matters most, everything else becomes a distraction. And distractions, even when they're disguised as opportunities, are still distractions. You can't master anything when you're halfway invested in everything. You can't dominate your industry, your craft, your mission, when your energy is fragmented in 1,000 directions. Mastery requires focus. Focus requires space. Space requires elimination. That's the real formula, not hustle. Not grind, not chaos, but intentional reduction, purposeful simplification, ruthless clarity. When you eliminate what's unnecessary, you don't just gain time, you gain power. You gain momentum. You gain the ability to move with speed and precision. You become lighter, sharper, more dangerous in the best possible way, because now your energy is concentrated. Your work is aligned. Your efforts are targeted. You're not just doing more, you're becoming more, and that is how you accelerate. If time is the currency of productivity, then energy is the engine that drives it. You can have all the time in the world, but without the energy to show up with clarity, power, and focus, time becomes meaningless. It's not about how many hours you have in a day. It's about what you're capable of doing with those hours. And the difference between showing up and truly performing often comes down to one factor: how well you protect your peak energy. Most people plan their days around tasks. They build to-do lists, book meetings, slot in errands, and try to fill every moment with activity. But what they don't plan around is their energy. They don't consider when they're most creative, most alert, most mentally sharp. They ignore the natural rhythm of their body and brain, and as a result, they end up doing their most important work when they're already depleted, distracted, or drained. That's not productivity, that's survival. Peak energy isn't something that happens by accident. It's not random and it's not unlimited. Your energy follows patterns. It follows biology. It follows how you sleep, how you eat, how you think, how you move, and how you manage stress. You have windows throughout the day where your brain is firing on all cylinders, where your attention is strong, your focus is deep, and your creativity is alive. And then there are periods where everything slows down, where your body is tired, your mind is cloudy, and even the smallest task feels like a mountain. That's normal, that's human, but here's the mistake. Most people waste their peak hours on the wrong things. They give their best energy to emails, to administrative tasks, to meetings that drain more than they contribute. They get caught in reactive loops, responding, checking, scrolling, while you work, the strategic thinking, the creative breakthroughs, the work that actually moves them forward, get postponed for later. And later is when they're tired. Later is when their willpower is low. Later is when they're not operating at full strength. So that work gets pushed again and again until it becomes a burden. And over time, the important becomes the neglected, and momentum fades. To perform at a high level, you have to reverse that cycle. You have to design your day around your energy, not your calendar. That means identifying your peak windows and fiercely protecting them. That means creating space for your most important work when your mind is sharp, not when you're trying to survive the last 2 hours of the day. It's not about doing more. It's about doing what matters when you're most capable of doing it well. There is a myth that productivity means being on all the time, that the highest achievers are grinding from sunrise to midnight, never stopping, never slowing down. That's not true. That's how you burn out, not how you break through. The elite performers, the ones who create real impact, they understand that energy is a finite resource. They guard it. They build habits that support it. They rest strategically, not as a reward, but as a requirement. They don't sacrifice sleep for status. They don't glorify exhaustion. They know that being tired is not a badge of honor. It's a warning sign that something needs to change. Protecting your peak energy also means being intentional with what you allow into your mind. Mental energy is just as important as physical energy. Every distraction you entertain, every notification you check, every piece of negative input you absorb chips away at your reserves. You lose focus, you lose clarity, and once your mental energy is drained, your decisions become reactive instead of strategic. You stop thinking long-term, you start just trying to get through the day. That's when mistakes happen. That's when opportunities get missed. You have to become ruthless about where your energy goes, because not everything deserves it. Not every problem is yours to solve. Not every message needs an immediate reply. Not every fire is urgent. Your energy is not infinite, and if you give it away without intention, you will have nothing left when it's time to do the work that actually matters. Start paying attention to when you feel most alive. Track your own rhythm. For some people, it's early morning. For others, it's mid-morning or late afternoon. Whenever it is, protect that time like it's sacred. Block it out, remove distractions, turn off the noise. Build a system that makes your peak energy time non-negotiable. That's when you write the book. That's when you design the product. That's when you close the deal, create the strategy, develop the vision. That's when the real work happens. Everything else can wait. And if you don't know when your peak energy window is, start experimenting. Try deep work in different parts of the day. Notice the difference in focus, in creativity, in stamina. Your body will tell you. Your brain will tell you. The key is to listen and respond. Because your job isn't to push through everything. Your job is to align your work with your power, to operate in sync with your strength, to show up fully when it counts. That's how real progress happens. That's how breakthroughs are made. That's how you go from busy to brilliant. There's something deeply satisfying about being in motion. Something that makes us feel like we're doing the right thing just because we're doing something. The act of moving, checking boxes, answering messages, shifting from one task to the next, it tricks the brain into thinking, I'm getting things done. But the truth is, not all movement is forward. Not all effort leads to evolution, and not all action creates achievement. There is a massive difference between motion and progress, and that difference is where success either flourishes or fails. Motion is seductive. It gives us the illusion of momentum. It's activity we can point to, things we can show others, hours we can measure. It's the dopamine hit that comes from checking something off the list, even if that thing was low value or completely disconnected from the bigger vision. And we start to crave that feeling. We start to chase that rush. We start to confuse the sensation of doing something with the impact of doing something meaningful. But you can be in motion all day and never take a single step toward your goal. Progress feels different. Progress isn't always fast. It isn't always clean. It often doesn't look impressive to the outside world. In fact, real progress usually happens in silence, away from the spotlight, in the hours of deep work that no one claps for. Progress isn't always exciting. It's often repetitive, gritty, uncomfortable. But it's real. It moves you. It changes you, it builds something that lasts, and in the long run, it's the only thing that matters. Most people aren't afraid of working hard. They're afraid of working hard on the right thing. Because doing what matters requires risk. It requires focus. It requires facing what's difficult, what's uncertain, what might fail. So instead, we stay busy. We stay in motion. We stay in the comfort zone of productivity theater, doing enough to feel active, but not enough to feel uncomfortable. We become experts at movement and amateurs at progress. The problem is, time doesn't care whether you are moving or progressing. Time just keeps passing, and one day, you wake up and realize you've been working tirelessly, but not intentionally. That you've been spinning your wheels in routines that haven't evolved in months or even years. That you've been solving the same problems, having the same conversations, facing the same challenges over and over again because you never stopped to ask, is this actually working? Is this actually helping me grow? Progress requires measurement. It requires reflection. It requires courage. It forces you to ask the hard questions. What result did this create? What value did this add? Did this move me closer to my ultimate vision or just make me feel productive for a few hours? That kind of honesty is rare, because it can be uncomfortable to admit that some of what we've poured energy into hasn't really gotten us anywhere. But discomfort is the birthplace of transformation. Without it, we stay in motion without ever making meaningful progress. To move forward, you have to know what forward actually looks like. That means defining what success means to you. Not what it means to your boss, not what it means to society, not what it means to your past self. What does success look like right now in this season of your life? Because only then can you distinguish between what's essential and what's just movement. Only then can you start to trim the excess and redirect your energy toward high, leverage actions. Only then can you stop running in circles and start climbing. One of the biggest traps in personal growth and achievement is mistaking motion for growth. People say they're learning because they read 10 books, but have they applied anything? People say they're improving because they're always working on themselves. But are they showing up differently? Are the results changing? That's the metric. Not how much you've done, but how much you've grown. Not how busy you were, but how far you've come. Sometimes the most powerful progress you can make comes from stopping. From stepping back. From creating space to evaluate, adjust, and redirect. Constant motion can keep you from ever seeing where you are. It becomes a smokescreen for stagnation. That's why pause is powerful. That's why reflection is necessary. Not to stop the journey, but to make sure the journey is actually taking you somewhere. The challenge is that motion is addictive. It makes us feel important. It makes us feel productive. It fills our days, occupies our minds, and silences our fears for a while. But progress is what fulfills us. It's what drives meaning. It's what gives weight to the work and direction to the effort. It's not always as loud as motion, but it's far more powerful. To live a life of impact, you have to be willing to trade the comfort of constant activity for the discipline of consistent advancement. You have to resist the urge to fill every moment and instead ask, what's the one thing I can do that truly moves me forward? Because progress isn't about doing more. It's about doing what matters and then doing it again and again and again until the motion becomes momentum and that momentum becomes mastery. We live in a world that confuses movement with meaning, where busyness is praised but results are overlooked, where filling your calendar feels more rewarding than fulfilling your purpose. But if you've been caught in that cycle, if you've been grinding, hustling, checking boxes, and still feel stuck, it's time to draw a line in the sand. Because this isn't about doing more. It's about doing what matters. It's about building a life that's driven by clarity, not chaos. A life where your actions are aligned with your vision. where your days aren't measured by how much you did, but by how far you moved toward your true goals. Clarity gives you direction. Focus turns that direction into action. Elimination clears the path. Energy powers the climb. And progress, the real kind, is what makes the journey worthwhile. You don't need to be busier. You need to be bolder. You need to stop confusing activity with achievement. Stop pouring energy into things that don't serve your growth. And start making decisions that are aligned with who you're becoming, not who you've been. So starting now, stop asking how to get more done. Start asking what is worth doing at all. Because that's where real productivity begins. That's where transformation starts. And that's where your next level lives.